Thank you so much, Christine. Good morning to all of you. Good afternoon to those of you who are viewing this from Australia. Selamat pagi, selamat siang. My name is Saeed Zaidan Shah, and I am the Deputy Country Director of ADB Indonesia Resident Mission. And it is with great pleasure that I welcome everyone to this virtual launch of the Leveraging Data for Urban Design and Planning in Post-COVID Cities Manual. The ongoing pandemic and its massive economic and social impacts have emphasized the urgency of developing pandemic resilience in our cities. And as such, cities around the world have been forced to reflect on how they are able to mitigate, manage, and respond to the pandemic. This manual, which we will launch today, was developed by the Future Cities Laboratory Singapore, will serve or should serve as a guide for cities to leverage available data to enhance planning policies in the post-pandemic era. The development of this manual was funded by the Asian Development Bank under the framework of the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund, which is supported by the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and managed by ADB. We have a packed program today, so we are keen to get going. We should start with the opening remarks from my colleague, Mr. Srinivas Sampath, who is the Director of the Urban Development and Water Division of the Asian Development Bank. He also serves as the fund manager of the AASCTF and oversees their operations monitoring, evaluations, and reporting. Srini will deliver his remarks in English. Srini, over to you.
Saeed, thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this launch event of the Knowledge Project, leveraging data for urban design and planning in post-COVID cities. I'm quite delighted to see Honorable Deputy Mayor of Makassar, Australian General Counsel, and Stephen Keynes, Director of Future Cities, also joining us today. As my colleague Saeed was mentioning, this activity has been possible through the DFAT-funded ASEAN Australia Smart City Trust Fund that is managed by ADB. And Joris, my colleague, who's here also in the event today, is actually the one who's managing this. I would also like to express my gratitude to colleagues in the City of Makassar, Future Cities Lab, and all of those who contributed to developing and testing the approaches outlined the Knowledge Project. Saeed really set the context very well in terms of where we are today with the pandemic. And I wanted to just reiterate that the cities in Asia Pacific have found themselves facing and heading to a perfect economic storm following COVID-19. The pandemic has really shown how vulnerable our cities are, the urban structure, the service system, the societies, and the perpetuation of economic disparities as a result of COVID-19. So addressing these vulnerabilities and inequalities is going to demand a rethink as how we approach urban development, particularly developing holistic and integrated solutions that would enhance citywide urban resilience and prioritize expansion of adopted capacities, and ensuring that most vulnerable citizens of the cities are protected and are not impacted adversely by these significant shocks. Cities and infrastructure built today will define as the city's physical development structure for many years. So therefore, this key to building back better is going to be building back smarter. A human-centered approach to planning and development combined with smart and evidence-based solution will certainly support the cities to move forward with the next best practice as against the traditional approach to the next practice, which is more towards preparing and forward thinking. So I would say, let's make our cities future ready today. If that is one message I would really like to leave behind for the audience today. This people-centered approach, next practice planning and development approach, actually will enable cities to transcend the learning curves that each one of us have to go through in responding and readapting ourselves to the pandemic and the future shocks that we have. That is the only way for us to move forward if we want to really achieve a truly green, inclusive, competitive, healthy, and resilient cities. We know that cities have existed since the millennium and have managed to respond to such shocks. But I think this gives us a very good opportunity how we should prepare our cities for future shocks, whether it's global economic recession, health epidemics, natural disaster, and security threats. We will always be facing these kind of challenges. So it's probably even more important why we should make our cities far more resilient. Let me conclude by saying that I hope this knowledge product would help us in leveraging data better and in understanding the challenges that are pertinent to urban areas and how these data could be used in building back smarter for future. Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, Srini, for that welcoming remarks. Some of the key takeaways that I think we can take from that we can derive from that is the manual intends to help build back cities, not just better, but also smarter. And with the manual, we hope to be able to make the city future ready. At the center of this manual is the case study that we've done in the city of Makassar in Indonesia. So the manual is developed basically using spatial pandemic-related data from the city to support resilient planning in the city and beyond. With that in mind, I take great pleasure in introducing Ibu Hajah Fatmawati Rusdi, who is the Deputy Mayor of the Makassar City, Indonesia, to deliver her remarks. She will deliver her remarks in Bahasa Indonesia. Ibu Fatmawati, the floor is yours. Ibu, you're still muted, Ibu. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Miss Christine, and good morning, everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang terhormat tim ASEAN Development Bank, yang terhormat tim ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund, yang terhormat Kepala OPD Lingkup Pemerintahan Kota Makassar, dan yang terhormat para undangan yang berbahagia. Alhamdulillah, puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, di pagi yang berbahagia ini kita semua diberi nikmat kesehatan untuk menghadiri acara launch of manual on leveraging data for urban design and planning in post-COVID cities. Makassar 2 kali tambah baik adalah sebuah tekad perubahan progresif yang terukur, sekaligus ini menjadi target 5 tahun ke depan di segala bidang di seluruh Kota Makassar yang dapat dirasakan langsung oleh seluruh masyarakat. Nah, untuk mewujudkan target Makassar 2 kali tambah baik, tentunya dibutuhkan pelayanan publik standar kota dunia yang bekerja dalam sebuah teknologi terpadu, yaitu Sombere and Smart City, sekaligus menjawab tantangan adaptasi terhadap revolusi industri 4.0 saat ini, sebagaimana di mana sistem pelayanan tersebut harus mampu diakses dengan mudah oleh seluruh masyarakat tanpa terkecuali. Nah, tuntutan dan harapan masyarakat Kota Makassar akan kualitas hidup yang lebih baik, apalagi di tengah COVID-19 ini sangat mendesak. Nah, sekaligus menjadi tuntutan bagaimana menghadirkan imunitas kota yang kuat. Untuk mewujudkan visi misi percepatan Kota Makassar, kota dunia yang Sombere and Smart City dengan imunitas yang kuat untuk semua. Salah satu program yang ada saat ini untuk penanggulangan COVID-19 adalah Makassar Recover, ya, di mana tahapan dan implementasi untuk menerapkan 3 tahapan utama, yaitu imunitas kesehatan yang pertama, yang kedua adalah adaptasi sosial, dan yang ketiga adalah pemulihan ekonomi, di mana program ini ketiganya dilakukan secara serentak di seluruh wilayah Kota Makassar, sehingga masyarakat Kota Makassar dapat merasakan manfaat dari program yang dijalankan, apalagi di tengah pandemi COVID-19 ini. Tentunya dengan kehadiran program ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund, ini perlu diapresiasi terutama dalam membantu mensukseskan program Makassar Recover, serta pemanfaatan data yang lebih baik untuk memajukan Kota Makassar pasca COVID. Nah, yang tentunya meningkatkan sistem dan tata kelola pemerintahan melalui teknologi digital, serta diharapkan kepada semua perangkat daerah serta stakeholder terkait pada kerjasama ini untuk mendapatkan hasil yang maksimal
have the
sehingga
maximum optimal benefit so that Makassar city will be able to be comfortable and to achieve a livable city. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in concluding my remarks, I'm on behalf of the Makassar city, I would like to extend our thanks, especially to the Asian Smart City and Development ADB that have assisted Makassar City in various programs, especially in sanitation and also for the poor areas through MSMIP program or RISE, and also the previous assistance in the previous programs. In the few months ago, the AASCTF also assisted Makassar to analyze the spreading of COVID-19, which at that time it was already conveyed to the team COVID in Makassar. So hopefully it will be beneficial for the Makassar city. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Peace and blessings be all of you.
Thank you so much, Ibu Hajah Fatmawati Rusti. I would like, for sharing your remarks with us. I'm also pleased to note that you plan to use the manual basically to be able to serve the people of Makassar better, and also using the manual in order to create a livable city, a more livable city for the people of Makassar. At this point, I would like to invite our speakers for a quick virtual photo op. We also would like to seek the indulgence and patience of our attendees as we take this quick photo op. Perhaps I'll ask my colleague Christine to guide us in taking this photo op.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Said. So if I could just ask our speakers to open their cameras and just to look into your camera. If you have the cover of the manual with you, I would like to ask you to just put it up beside you, and then we'll do the picture. So if you're ready, we'll take the picture in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And just one more. So 1, 2, and 3. All right. Thank you very much. Back to you, Pak Said.
Thank you so much, Christine. Now I would like to thank you to our speakers and our participants for your patience. Now I would like to continue with the program with our next three presenters, Professor Stephen Carnes and Dr. Devisari Tunas from the Future Cities Laboratory Singapore, and Dr. Ihsan Latif from Universitas Hasanuddin. Professor Carnes and Dr. Tunas led the team from the Future Cities Laboratory Singapore in the development of this manual, in close coordinations with colleagues from Universitas Hasanuddin. And today, they will discuss the primary themes in the manual and how it can support the crafting of practical post-pandemic urban planning recommendations. Professor Carnes will start off the presentation and will be delivering his remarks in Bahasa Indonesia. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Selamat pagi semuanya. Selamat pagi terutama.
Good morning all, especially to a Deputy Mayor Fatmawati Rusdi and Ibu Robin, Ms. Bronwyn Robbins, Mr. Srini Vasampat, Mr. Said. Thank you very much to all of you and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Cairns. I'm the director of the Future Cities Lab, or FCL, in Singapore ETH Center. The mission of FCL is to develop sustainable cities and settlement system through science, using design which is contextual to the place and the changing flow of time. In other words, we use a design research or DR approach to bring scientific insights to real-world situations. Honestly speaking, this process cannot never be carried out exclusively in the laboratory, but must involve colleagues and stakeholders from various disciplines and adapt to institutional systems. We are very proud to have been part of the process development team on this project. We thank ADB for the UNHAS and so the Makassar City Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia and ASEAN Australian Smart Cities and ADB. We hope that this data analysis guide can complement the Makassar Recover Program and support Makassar's effort to become a pandemic resilient city in the future. Thank you very much.
Saya kembalikan ke Pak Said atau Ibu.
I return to Pak Said or Ibu Devina Sari. Can continue. And then Pak Iksan. Thank you very much, Pak Said. Thank you very much, Professor Cern, for the remarks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and all the colleagues from Makassar City. The next one, I would like to introduce the spatial analysis. As I mentioned, this guidance is a support from Australian ASEAN Smart City Trust Fund and Asian Development for Makassar City in assisting to make Makassar to be a pandemic resilient city. This guidance is to complement program Makassar Recovery Program, which was recently launched. Makassar City. Makassar City, as the other cities in Indonesia, continuously collect data relevant to COVID pandemic since last year to assist the monitor and respond the pandemic crisis in Makassar. The data is not only enrich the data inventory of Makassar City, but the strategic processing will be able to provide a better understanding about the trend of pandemic spreading related to the density factor, the spatial structure of the city, infrastructure provision, and city facilities. This knowledge in the future could be translated in the form of guide for the pandemic resilient city planning. This guidance, as Pak Stephen mentioned, it is developed using the design research approach, which is usually used to settle complex problem, which is difficult to be defined, that cover the life of many people, then there is no solution yet. Pandemic is an example of complex problem. This approach covers 7 actions, which is definition, focus, data collection, experiment, contextualization, generalization, and narration, and the 7 supporting factors. These 7 actions do not need to be done chronologically, but it could be repeated and combined with the problems and also the dynamics of the actors. This guide outlines these 7 actions practically by explaining why, what, how of each of the actions. This guide could be downloaded in the form of booklet and the tutorial video and the link that we will share after this event. Definition action. Definition action is done to reflect the issues in order from various point of views and also from various dimensions by paying attention of the negative impact for all parties in the city. Focus action. It is done to determine priority to be achieved realistically by observing the vision of the short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning.
Aksi kumpul data dilakukan
and
untuk
the data collection action, it is done to select data necessary strategically to improve the understanding to the issue. The next one is the example of the set data that has been collected by the city that could be considered for the analysis purpose. For example, case data demography data, land use data, basic infrastructure, general facilities, and pandemic response. The best data is the data of the coordinated points of the positive cases and also city data at the level of the sub-district, or even better from the neighborhood association of the citizen association.
Aksi eksperimen,
experiment action, it is done to try to cross-analyze different set of data to try to find a relationship pattern based on the perspective and the new understanding. This is using trial and error method.
Next slide, please. Berikut ini adalah contoh.
The next one is the cross-analysis that could be done. To explore the pandemic-prone areas, we could cross-analyze the data of pandemic and also density data of the population and also clean water and land use. To identify the community which is prone to pandemic, we could cross-analyze the location of the pandemic cases and also the data of the mid and low income people, and so density of the demography. To explore the capacity, institutional capacity, we could also cross-analyze the data, the location of the pandemic, also pandemic response, and also if it is location of COVID, and also which is cross-analyzed with the data of demography. Contextualization action, it is done to validate the analysis result, for example, by a consultation with the expert, field check, comparative study, and other data checking. If it is not it's still not conclusive, then we could go back to the action of data gathering and experiment again. Generalization action, it is done to translate the result of the analysis practically in the concept of the pandemic resilient city planning by considering the existing planning system.
Aksi narasi dilakukan.
Narration action, it is done to communicate the concept to all stakeholders that could be asked to work together in applying the concept to practice that concept. This guide is made with the support of the city planning agency in Makassar, Universitas Hasanuddin, and then AASCTF and ADB. I'd like to thank you, all the parties involved in this.
Metode ini
This method has been tried in the workshop last April, which was supported by University Hasanuddin. And the next one, I'd like to invite Professor Iksan to provide reflection of that event. Pak Iksan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Ibu Devi Sari, Prof. Cairns. I'd like to continue with the activities for 3 hours in the 15th of April 2021. I'd like to extend my thanks to the government city of Kota Makassar, in this one, the Bapeda Makassar, and all the service office relevant to this, and then programs, and also the spatial service cities, etc., because they send delegates together with the students for the city planning, and also the Professor Ananta Widono, which is involved in this process. About 24 participants that have participated in this on the 15th of April, where in this training, as already conveyed by Ibu Sari, that there are 7 sequences, and during this training, we only conducted 4 sequences. And so the first sequence is related to the definition, so about the problems existing in the city's infrastructure, etc. And so what kind of problems existing. And so it is explored by all participants in 3 groups. And then on the result of this problem solving, we try to focus which problem that could be settled in the planning science. And so there are some groups are selected, problem group, which is related to the problems related to planning, as already conveyed. After we focus to the current problem, then we make an assessment in the respective problem. We need which kind of data. So from the number of if it is about population, we need demography, about the spatial, and in each SKPD. And so in which SKPD, and then we will explore in the data gathering. And the next one is the sequence experiment, where, as has been explained by Ibu Sari, there is matrix method, and also this matrix will then be mixed with that problem. And so from each data will produce what? And so this data and then explored in this group during this training, and then it will produce what is the meaning of the combination of that matrix from several data. And so that was the process of the training, which was done in cooperation with Hasanuddin University and the Makassar city government, and also from FCL Singapore. And so I now return to Pak Said.
Thank you so much, Pak Ihsan, Stephen, and Ibu Devita. This is a very clear, very insightful presentation. I would like to now sort of just maybe allocate 8 minutes or so for some Q&A session. I wonder whether anyone would like to raise any question. Any of the attendees would like to raise any question. If not, or perhaps let me sort of kickstart the question with, mungkin saya akan ajukan satu pertanyaan.
I will now raise a question.
Also in bahasa Indonesia. This approach has, or the approach that you have outlined in the manual has been tested in Makassar. But the advantage of Makassar is that there's a large amount of data available. Now, how adaptable or how much can we replicate this approach in other cities in Indonesia or in ASEAN where data may be a challenge? Jadi pendekatan yang ada dalam manual ini,
the approach in this manual could be conducted in Makassar because there are data available there on how the possibility that how we apply this in other cities in Indonesia or in Asia, where the data maybe become a challenge.
One of the three presenters perhaps to respond to this question. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Pak. Pertanyaannya bagus sekali.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. It's a very sharp question.
The issue of data is very interesting, very important. It's the center of our research. It's true, Makassar has a very solid data collection and data management system. The really interesting aspect of the sort of datascape at the moment is that we are increasingly mixing very high quality satellite data with local data. And the really interesting issue with data is how do you combine quality satellite data, which is of course global and non-situation specific, with high quality ethnographic qualitative data on the ground. And I think that is the issue that we have experimented with. We've been supported a lot with Pak Ihsan and colleagues in municipality of Makassar. And we would, as Ibu Sari mentioned at the end, we also want to theorize. So how do we learn lessons that can be used in other locations? So I think that's also deep in the DNA of the manual. And perhaps, Sari, you could expand upon that point. And I also know Pak Ihsan has a very clear position on this.
Terima kasih, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Pak Said. As Stephen mentioned, the Makassar city especially have a lot of data, but the other cities actually also have good data. One of the issues is the data is a bit fragmented, and so it needs a better management approach. But I feel that we cannot wait until the city has an excellent data before we could conduct an analysis. But the analysis process or the examination of the data could be done step by step, bit by bit, because by that we will be able to see what data is lacking, and so we could make improvement, or what data that should be improved in terms of the quality, and so we know which data that we could find in other means. And so from the process of the processing and the management of data, it is a process of learning for all and for all the actors.
Ya, saya tambahkan Pak Said.
I'd like to add,
Ya, melibatkan
it is
universitas
also involving university,
menjadi sebuah advantage.
so it becomes an advantage for the city government anywhere, because by involving in university, then the students, potential students could collect data from relevant sectors. In Makassar, there are sectors involved. These sector each has data, and so they collect it. They respectively collect the data by involving university, and so Bapeda as the leading sector for the development, for the planning. Then the students and university, they could collect the data from various SKPD and work together with Bapeda so that the data for which function and for what. And so I just would like to give you a picture about the process that we have gone through with the Makassar city. So we collect the data in each department. And so this will facilitate the Bapeda to make coordination about a number of data in the respective department. Thank you very much, Pak Said. Thank you very much, Stephen, Ibu Devita, and Professor Iksan. There is a question. There is
from the attendee. Now, the data from the pandemic is crisis short-term. The data from the pandemic is short-term data, while urban planning and design is for longer term. Could you speak more to how the data is actually used for urban planning and design with concrete case examples? This is from an anonymous attendee. And there's another question asked, have you been able to form any preliminary conclusion from your project or research? So if you could answer these two questions together, yeah.
Juga pertanyaannya agak sulit ya.
It is a bit difficult, yeah, the question. And
so the question really asks about, we've been talking a little bit about the spatial consistency of data. And as we know, data is delivered from many different forms, many different technologies, many different institutional frameworks. So that assembling that data into a coherent story is a very significant part of the ASEAN software. So the software was developed to make the most of the best available data. But the question is very interesting because it asks the same kind of question in time. And I think that's also a very subtle and very important point. Cities are not just planned in space, they're planned in time and over time. So we are also very aware of that. I think Sari will be able to speak in more detail about this, but the pandemic data was delivered to us in different time increments. At the beginning, it was delivered on a monthly basis, perhaps even weekly, I think. And then over time, it was longer periods of time. So we're working with different temporalities for the COVID situation itself. But it's not simply to say that city data is necessarily medium to long term. Cities have daily rhythms, they have weekly rhythms, they have seasonal rhythms, in which case we're always looking at other kinds of temporality through demographic data, economic data, Even a 24-hour life of a city changes. So a city is different in the morning as it is at the height of a market and in the evening. So we regard cities as spatial as well as temporal, and we would address the same unevenness of spatial data. We would address time in the same way. In other words, we use the best available data. And I want to come back to Pak Ihsan's point itu. Idenya sangat bagus, Pak, karena
the idea is very good, because what is most important is our experience in Makassar is that the spirit of the students, there are those the one that will make this data important. If the data is not available, then work together with the students. They have a good spirit, and so they have a very good skills.
Data with all the available crowdsource energies and experience that we have. And I think especially in Pak Ihsan's department, the students turned out to be very, very important. So if there are gaps in the temporal sequence, then we find ways to fill those gaps.
Stephen, if you could just respond to the other question, just very briefly, were there any preliminary conclusions that you were able to form from this project or research?
Yes, definitely. But I will defer to Sari because I think she masters this area very well.
Yeah, maybe I can give a brief conclusion for this. Sorry, saya bicara bahasa Indonesia ya. Jadi konklusi.
And so the conclusion, the preliminary conclusion, it seems that the effect or the factor of density is, I think, is influencing the pandemic in Makassar. And so in the future, we will be able to see how the cities could manage the density, spatial, more strategically. And second, in the cluster, pandemic cluster is also shown in the areas where in the province where the lacking of clean water. So this is related to sanitation. And one more thing, the pandemic cluster also happens in the area heavy human flow, and so there are a lot of traffic of people, a lot of people gathering. So one example is in the area where there are a lot of universities, a lot of schools, because there are a lot of students that they stay in crowd. And so this is the logical explanation, because we actually know, but with the spatial analysis, then we will know which area that cluster happening, and so what factors influencing the formation of that cluster. Thank you very much, Ibu Sadian.
Running short of time. So I think we should proceed with the next agenda in this launch. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this manual would not have been possible without the support of the Australian government, particularly the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And here today, to close out our short launch of the event, I would like to introduce Ms. Bronwyn Robbins, who is the Australian Consul General in Makassar. Ms. Bronwyn will deliver her remarks in Bahasa Indonesia. Over to you, Ms. Bronwyn.
Okay. Assalamualaikum.
Peace and blessings. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to thank key speakers and stakeholders for their participation in today's session. Deputy Mayor of Makassar, Ibu Fatmawati Rusdi, and the head of laboratorium of the tourism and mitigation disaster mitigation laboratory at University Bapak Iksan Latif, Director of Urban Development and Water Division in Southeast Asia Department of the Asian Development, Mr. Srinivas Sampat, and also from the Future Cities Laboratory in Singapore, Professor Stephen Cairns, and Director, and also Devi Sari Tunas, Scenario Coordinator. And our moderator, Mr. Zaid Zaidansyah from ADB. It is my pleasure to deliver closing remarks for today's launch of the ASEAN Australia Smart Cities Trust Fund Manual on leveraging data for urban design and planning in post-COVID cities. As close neighbors and friends, Australia and Indonesia have a shared interest in managing the COVID-19 pandemic in cities, towns, and villages throughout our region. We are working closely together to respond to and recover from the impact of COVID-19 and to be able to recover from this pandemic. In 2018, Australian government, through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, committed to contribute 20 million Australian dollars towards the establishment of Australia ASEAN Smart Cities Trust Fund, or AASCTF. AASCTF focuses on building livable cities that are green, competitive, inclusive, and resilient. Australia has long been a leader in smart cities technology, and it is only fitting that we should work with our ASEAN colleagues to build a better future together. As I have said to some of you before, participating in AASCTF events is something I'm very proud of. And I was part of the team that designed AASCTF many years ago while I was working in Australia and Manila. There are many ways in which the AASCTF is providing support for the planning, service delivery, and financial management of Makassar. One example is through the Climate Digital Resilience Platform, which is supported through Australia's National Science Agency, CSIRO, and for which there was a demonstration showcase last Friday, which some of you may have attended. Today, we are here to commemorate the launch of the AASCTF manual on leveraging data for urban design and planning in post-COVID cities, which sets out the important role data can play in ensuring cities are better designed and planned for the future. You have heard from our speakers today about how important the integration of public health consideration into city planning during COVID-19 pandemic. Added to the problems of rapid urbanization, public transport, and waste disposal, the health threat of COVID-19 meant that we have need to gather a clear understanding how the pandemic has been interacting with our cities, including where and how our populations move around and interact with each other. This understanding comes through data. Many cities, including Makassar, have been collecting all kinds of data during COVID-19 pandemic. If this data is properly analyzed, cities can gain a comprehensive understanding of how the pandemic has unfolded locally, where the most vulnerable communities are, and how they can transform their systems and services to best support the needs of all residents. As our speakers have explained, the AASCTF manual we have launched today will give Makassar the tools and guidance it needs to do exactly that. Well, in the past, we have relied upon scientific evidence to help cities plan in a smart and resilient way. The fast-moving nature of the pandemic has meant cities have needed to make decisions before waiting for conclusive scientific outcome. This manual will help Makassar and other cities under AASCTF to make smart and evidence-based planning decisions using their own data. Australia is very proud to be able to support the cities like Makassar to better leverage data for urban design and planning through the AASCTF. Thank you once again to everyone involved in putting this manual together for facilitating that support. I'm very happy to see the positive impact of ASTV in where I live in Makassar, and I hope to be able to see how this manual can further support Makassar to become a smarter and a more livable city, which is more responsive to its population's public health needs. I now hand back to our moderator, Mr. Said Zaidiansyah. Many thanks.
Thank you, Bronwyn, for sharing your closing remarks with us. Before we end our session, I would like to thank all of our speakers today for helping us formally launch this manual, which is available to download from the ADB Knowledge Events website. You should see the QR code and links to download the page on your screen. We'll also be sending the presentations and recordings from this session to all attendees via email. And finally, we hope you could also send us your feedback on today's session by answering the webinar evaluation survey. You should see the QR code and links to these on screen. And with these final reminders, we close today's session. Thank you for joining us and have a good day, everyone. With this, we conclude the formal launch of the manual on leveraging data for urban design and planning in post-COVID cities. Thank you all.